Outrage is following the issue of arrest warrants for Israel's Prime Minister and former Defense Minister. The International Criminal Court has accused them of war crimes in the battle against Hamas in Gaza.
Congressional leaders are now calling on the Senate to sanction the court. Paul Strand brings us the story from Jerusalem.
Prime Minister Netanyahu swiftly defended Israel's actions in Gaza.
No war is more just than the war that Israel has been waging in Gaza after Hamas attacked us unprovoked.
Israeli President Isaac Herzog wrote the decision has turned universal justice into a universal laughingstock. The ICC charges Netanyahu and Gallant are guilty of the war crime of starvation as a method of warfare and the crimes against humanity of murder, persecution, and other inhumane acts.
We are accused of deliberately harming civilians, while we are doing everything to prevent harm to civilians. We are accused of starving a population, while we are bringing hundreds of thousands of tons of food to feed the population.
The ICC's charges came amid evidence of another international organization's bias against Israel. A new report from the group UN Watch said a former United Nations Relief and Works Agency Commissioner General held a secret meeting in 2017 with terrorist groups including Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad. There, the UNRWA chief reportedly told them, "We are one, and no one can separate us." As for the ICC warrants, they mean Netanyahu or Gallant could be arrested if they go to certain countries accepting the court's authority. Nations such as Ireland and the Netherlands agreed right away to do it if given the chance.
And to those countries, Netanyahu won't be able to travel, and that's a very, very big thing.
Netanyahu's hoping for a tough backlash against the court.
This decision will have severe consequences for the ICC and those who cooperate with its decision.
President-elect Trump's soon-to-be National Security Advisor, Congressman Mike Waltz, promises you can expect a strong response to the anti-Semitic bias of the ICC and UN come January. House Foreign Affairs Committee Chairman Michael McCaul and Republican Senator Lindsey Graham want Senate Leader Chuck Schumer to bring up a bill for a vote that the House has already passed. The measure, called the Illegitimate Court Counteraction Act, Senate Bill 224, would impose sanctions on ICC employees or associates who aid this effort to prosecute Israeli leaders. Graham tweeted, "The court is a dangerous joke. It's now time for the Senate to act and sanction this irresponsible body." Paul Strand, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Well, CBN News Middle East Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell is with us now live from Jerusalem. So the court is claiming Israel is using starvation to punish the people in Gaza. What is Israel? How are they responding?
Well, Israel says that it's supplied, since the war began, Gordon, 1.1 million tons of food by air, land, and sea, including more than 56,000 trucks. Sends about 200 trucks filled with humanitarian aid each day into Gaza. That includes food, medical supplies, water, enough for 3,200 calories for every man, woman, and child in Gaza. In addition, Gordon, they have facilitated the vaccination of 97% of Gazans against polio. And, you know, in a recent Channel 12 report here in Israel, they concluded Hamas steals most of the food, sells it to their population, and by that, they've made about $500 million so they can recruit more fighters. So according to that report, Israel's aid is actually the main oxygen pipeline for Hamas. So it's aiding the very terror group it's fighting. So on the one hand, it fights the enemy. On the other hand, it gives its oxygen it needs to fight. So that's the case for Israel against starvation. 1.1 million tons of food since October.
Well, I've got to point out that Stanford University did a survey of Gaza, and they did it before October 7th, so it's more than a year ago. And in that survey, they discovered that the population of Gaza suffered from, this new term, food insecurity, which, for us that speak English, it's hunger. And that was all before the war. And so under Hamas was stealing their food then. All the humanitarian aid that was going was being stolen and being diverted into weapons and rockets, and how can we attack Israel? So I don't get the what evidence do they have that somehow Israel is using starvation as a weapon of war? This really doesn't make any sense. Are they just ignoring the facts on the ground?
Well, they seem to be, and also the UN at one time in the last few months accused Israel of creating a famine inside Gaza. But when you look at the facts on the ground and what actually Israel has been doing, facilitating all of this this humanitarian aid and food, not only by land, and they've opened other land corridors. They've also allowed the U.S. to bring in things by sea. They've opened the port of Ashdod and to be able to facilitate more aid. They've also had the UAE and Jordan providing aid as well. So boots on the facts on the ground, Gordon, don't seem to buttress this fact of trying to starve the population of Gaza.
All right, well, what are the practical political consequences of the charges?
Well, the practical consequences would be that if Benjamin Netanyahu or Yoav Gallant, if they go to any one of the 123 countries that are a signatory to the ICC, they could be arrested. As Paul said in his report, in Ireland and in the Netherlands have all said they would go ahead and arrest Netanyahu and/or Gallant. But also Hungary has invited Netanyahu to their country, and he says the president of Hungary says he will invite him, but he won't arrest him. And so I think it depends on what other country, how they see this ruling. So I think it has broader implications as well, Gordon, and I think it fuels anti-Semitism. It brands Israelis as war criminals. It gains credibility with its members. So the enemies of Israel and the Jews, I think, will use this as sort of a legal bludgeon to demonize and stigmatize the Jewish state, accusing them of war criminals, crimes against humanity, and starving the people of Gaza, even if the charges are unfounded or if the ICC really doesn't have jurisdiction on this.
Well, what's the reaction in Israel to the Senate bill? It's Senate Bill 224, the Illegitimate Court Counteraction Act, which is designed to follow ICC, where the U.S. will now sanction members of the International Court. How will that work?
Well, I think they're looking forward to that and looking forward to perhaps what the Trump administration will be doing. I think that legislation will be a priority for the Trump administration. We heard what Mike Waltz said as incoming national security advisor, that it's going to be a strong reaction to this. Likely they will advance sanctions, maybe against ICC officials, including Karim Khan and the judges who issued the warrants. And I think they're going to make that legislation a priority. Gordon, it also could lead to confrontations with European allies that are signatories of the ICC, like the UK and France. But I think you're going to have a strong reaction when the Trump administration comes in. As someone wrote, they should brace, the ICC should brace for impact.
All right, well, let's turn our focus to UNRWA, the UN Relief Works Agency. And this is just a bombshell report coming out of UN Watch, where there are links, and there's a picture showing it, links between UNRWA and terrorist group. What's the impact of that? And I will point out to the audience, there's a real sea change getting ready to happen. Under the Trump administration, he cut off funding to UNRWA because he was convinced that they were aiding terrorism. In the first week of the Biden administration, he reinstituted U.S. funding for UNRWA. So what's the take now? Do you think UNRWA is finally on its last legs? Is this horror going to go away?
Well, you would think so, with all the evidence that's come over the last several months of the connection with UNRWA and Hamas, and the implication of many Hamas and UNRWA employees being part of October 7th. When you talk about the UN Watch report, it's just added evidence of this incestuous relationship. During that meeting, the UNRWA head also emphasized a spirit of partnership with these groups, and their role as UNRWA would be a historical witness to the injustice that's befallen the Palestinian people, not so much humanitarian aid. And he actually invited them to challenge an UNRWA decision, and yet he wanted the meeting not to be publicized, that could lead to a loss of funding. And so the UN Watch report really is one more evidence of this relationship. And recently we talked, Gordon, to the head of the Ministry of Immigration here in Israel. He told us that if you weren't directly or indirectly connected to Hamas, you really couldn't work for UNRWA. All one more reason why the Knesset last month voted to divorce itself from UNRWA here in Israel.
I don't know if we have that picture in some kind of still. It's absolutely stunning that here you have the head of UNRWA meeting with known terrorist groups, and then the expression to them, "We are one," and then saying, "Please keep this meeting quiet because if our donor countries find out, our funding may be at risk." There's the picture, and you can see Palestinian Islamic Jihad, Hamas chief of foreign relations. It's absolutely incredible that you could have that kind of meeting, make that kind of statement, and then in the aftermath of October 7th, claim that you didn't know it. You didn't know Hamas employees were on your payroll. You didn't know Hamas tunnels were underneath your various posts in Gaza. You didn't realize rockets were being launched from classrooms. The web of lies coming out of the UN is absolutely stunning. Well, Chris, thank you for the report, and thanks for staying strong for Israel. You are our watchman on the wall. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Gordon.
For you at home, I encourage you to get involved in this. If I can get the slide up on the Senate bill, it's Senate Bill 224, and it's called the Illegitimate Court Counter-Action Act, which is a way to play on ICC. This is a direct act to put sanctions, U.S. sanctions, on anyone who is aiding that court, anyone involved in this decision. It's coming up before the Senate, and let's stand with Israel on this. There needs to be an absolute strong response. This is anti-Semitism. And Chris is right. It's going to be used as a bludgeon against Israel around the world, and a justification for anti-Semitism and a justification for wiping Israel off the map. Under our watch, that can't happen. We all vowed never again. Well, never again is right here and right now. And this latest ruling from the ICC is yet more evidence how strongly we need to stand for Israel.